Welcome to Nugget 102 with Steve Groman. Today we will be talking about plate tectonics.
And you know what's interesting? I have over 100 slides of the Pangea and the plate tectonics and how the continents have moved, probably up to about 135 or so now. And no two say the same thing. This is an article from June 2020, Science News. This one's rather interesting. Crust may have traveled in modern ways by 3.2 billion years ago. First of all, I would like people, as I read through this, keep an eye out, an ear out for the if words like may, might, could. This is all just a belief system. But we always have to remember the Bible says that at the time of the flood, the fountains of the great deep broke up. And the fountains of the great deep does not mean just like one or two little hot spots here and there. No, it was all over. And same day, all.
It was like Yellowstone on steroids across the entire earth.
Absolutely. And
Mount St. Helens and Mount Rainier.
All at the same time. And
Mount Vesuvius.
Even in the oceans, where you could track it, look at the earthquake maps, look at the volcano maps where they all exist. There is a trend to follow a pathway. That would no doubt be where those fountains broke up. And then, by the way, after the flood had been for 150 days on this earth, then the mountains rose, the valleys sank down. We have a far better explanation for the evidence that's out there.
We actually did a few nuggets on earthquakes. Might want to look back at those
nuggets. Might want to look
nuggets.
back at some of those, yes. Modern plate tectonics may have gotten underway as early as 3.2 billion years ago, about 400 million years earlier than many scientists thought. That timing suggests that the movement of the large pieces of Earth's crust could have played a role in making the planet more hospitable for life. Well, that would be nice. Anyway, a Harvard geologist and his colleagues measured the magnetic orientation of iron-bearing minerals in basalt and a rock layer that formed between 3.19 billion and 3.18 billion years ago. And once again, all these times obviously are just made up because there is no such thing as that time. And even if there was such a thing as that time, for them to be able to pinpoint that down to that specificness is just not even possible. But anyway, they say it includes rocks as old as 3.5 billion years old. The ancient bit of continent was on the move between 3.35 billion and 3.18 billion. They throw these numbers out there, and it all sounds really nice. Kind of reminds me of Colossians 2:8, doesn't it?
High-sounding nonsense verse?
High-sounding nonsense.
Where do you think they are coming up with these numbers?
They have to come up with something. What is interesting, this article is talking about, like it mentioned there, it will bring it up again later, that perhaps this is where life got its start, its single-cell organism of some sort. They want life to have started, they need it to have started somewhere. And if they reject God, people reject God, well then it has to be on its own somehow. They have to have time for all of their ideas because we don't see any of this kind of stuff happening. So you have to push the time out so far that there's no way to know it.
Do you have as many opinions as you have scientists?
Pretty much, and or more. It says the basalt, which burbled up as lava hardened during a journey, it contains iron-bearing minerals that point the way toward the Earth's magnetic poles. While the lava is still molten, the minerals rotated, orienting themselves to align with the north magnetic pole. By tracking the changes in orientation within the lava as more basalt formed during the journey, researchers were able to determine the speed. Well, now wait a second. Is it the fact that these minerals are forming, this stuff is coming up? Okay, fine, it can come up. When the fountains of the great deep broke up and the windows of heaven opened, it was chaos everywhere. It wasn't just a plate moving. It was the entire Earth was under in an upheaval.
It was a cataclysmic event.
It was a cataclysmic event. Scientists have long used such magnetic signposts to retrace the steps of continents, but the constant grinding and shifting of tectonic plates over the last few billion years has reworked Earth's surfaces many times over, leaving few outcrops older than 3 billion years. Again, they just throw these numbers out there and people are just oohed and awed by them, I suppose.
So they're saying that there isn't any surface or outcrops that are older than 3 billion?
That's what this article so far is saying, yes.
Okay.
This basalt is a rare site, both ancient and relatively unworked by heat and pressure that could have altered the minerals and reset their orientation. So there is something else that could have done this. The team examined 235 samples of basalt to create high-resolution map of magnetic orientations within the rock. Based on the map, the team estimates that about 3.2 billion years ago, one of these particular sections was at a latitude of about 45 degrees. So then they figure they have the 45 degree where it was, but notice the sentence. It says, but scientists don't know if the craton was north or south of the equator because they don't know the orientation of the magnetic poles back then. Well, the magnetic poles, they say they always are shifting and flipping and flopping and all that. And once again, that's based on the magnetic mineral content in the rock that they're looking at. What if something took place? What if the pole's not what's moving? It's the molten material that's moving, and it all took place place at the time of the flood. There would be an example of looking at something that would appear to be in shifting mode, but it's not that the pole moved, it would be that the molten material is moving. Because also, remember, this whole Earth is underwater. That is an enormous amount of volume of even water pushing this stuff too.
Let me see if I can understand what you're saying. You were saying that at the time of the flood, because of the fountains of the Great Deep breaking up, this type of material, magnetic material, would have moved. What these people are looking at are events that occurred at the time of the flood, and they are putting different time frames on how they're saying that these poles flip or the movement must have happened at different ages of time. But your conclusion is that it was all a one-time event, and that event would have been the flood. Sort of like the Grand Canyon, how they say it took eons of time for the layers to stack up, and you're saying it was a one-time event.
Right. But in this case, one-time event would not be meaning a short one-time event. It was during the duration of the flood.
But still short term in less than a year.
Yes, obviously short term. Because we have to remember, you mentioned Yellowstone, go back to the geysers. They are somewhat predictable, many of them, but they don't just continually go. They go and they settle down and they build and they go and they settle down. Well, when the fountains are breaking up, it's not just like one here, one there. It's a whole train of them. That's why we see the deep ridges and valleys out in the oceans today. Plus, when the mountains rose and the valley sank down, now that stuff is now busted up. All of these forces being applied to the Earth itself is going to cause things to move and to be pushed and to be pulled and all that kind of thing. But it's a short time frame, short time ago.
They are just saying that these are all different events that happened over long periods of time.
Eons of time. Billions of years of time.
Well, this seems like a good place to park this nugget, and we will continue in the next nugget on Life's Kickstart. Thank you.